Hey, what's up guys? My name is Sal, and this is another expedition log. Welcome to ExLog Phase 4. I had originally planned to do 1 or 2 episodes to bridge Phases 3 and 4, and then to come out swinging with some incredible new Cincinnati Mills footage. But lately I've had a bit more time on my hands while isolated in the Kuwait Studios Rathskeller. So I got to organizing some footage and doing a bit of archiving, and I found over 15 malls that I filmed and never edited, and figured this would be a good time to work through that backlog. I've had some incredible conversations with many of you on the Dead Malls of Discord server about these places. So to join, just download the Discord app and click the invite link in my description below. I'd also like to send a quick shout out to all of my patrons and elite explorers that have now joined my channel. If you'd like to join to get early access and sweet live stream and premiere chat perks, hit the blue button below that says join. Thanks again for all of your support, guys. The mall I chose for the premiere of Phase 4 shouldn't have ever been built. Alan Fortunoff, the late president of the former department store chain, rode success of the chain through the early 1970s and tried like hell to build an enclosed mall around his prized possession in Westbury on Long Island in New York. After over 25 years of developmental limbo, the Fortunoffs finally made it happen, but the mall would fail after only 10 years in operation. As we all wade through this uncertain time during the COVID-19 pandemic, take solace knowing that over 700,000 people have recovered. And we can thank the medical workers for that and for giving us hope. So today, while we're still not able to visit any malls due to the quarantine, come take a walk with me through the mall at the source. But first, a word from our sponsor. A one-man wrecking crew and Vietnam veteran tossed into the middle of the ocean and left for dead, only to become a master samurai and take revenge. Leon Isaac, starring alongside the beautiful Jane Kennedy in the 1978 grindhouse classic Death Force. Enjoy.
He could be just another war casualty.
You asking me to kill one of my own kind?
Douglas Russell, a cold, calculating death machine. A one-man death force.
The art of the samurai. Not fast enough.
Here's your pizza, sir. Keep chain.
Man death force.
That kid needs a father.
He don't need a mother like you for a father.
Do I look like a Japanese straggler? Morelli got a guy named McGee with him. I think I'll look him up. Where's Morelli? And McGee? I asked you a question.
Whoever it is, I want him. What the hell did he ever know about swords? Yeah. Look, Brooks, you better make sure I never hear from him again. You got it?
Get the hell out of here! Whoa! I didn't know I was worth so much.
Death force. When would he stop? And who could stop him?
In 1916, this area was originally the Hampstead Plains Aerodrome, which was a training field for the US Army Air Service. 1 year later in 1917, when we entered World War I, it was split into 2 large sections, Curtis Field and the Hazelhurst Field. Charles Lindbergh would actually take off from the airstrip here for the very first solo transatlantic flight back in 1927. The 2 fields were bought in 1929 by Roosevelt Field Incorporated, and they were combined. Through the 1930s, it would serve as America's busiest civilian airfield. But as World War II came, civilian aviation would be curtailed, and the Roosevelt Field area began seeing more housing developments. Shopping centers began popping up across the island in the 1950s, and in the 60s, enclosed shopping experiences were driving tons of retail traffic, especially in the Roosevelt Field area. The Roosevelt Field Mall opened as an open-air shopping center in 1956 and was enclosed by 1968 with a gross leasable area of 2,366,692 square feet, and it's just minutes away from the Mall of the Source, where we're at right now. An Orbox department store opened in Westbury on this very site on March 7, 1963, and just a few years later, in 1967, a massive $5 million Fortunoffs opened right next door, complete with 60 departments, 350 employees, 5 acres of parking, and an on-site restaurant, which serviced nearly 10,000 customers per day. Both stores were facing out on Old Country Road and had phenomenal success year over year. And on October 24, 1972, Alan Fortunoff unveiled his grand $5 million expansion to the Westbury Fortunoffs, with ambitious plans to double the size of the department store by adding over 200,000 square feet of enclosed retail space. Their store was producing incredible amounts of revenue, and due to this success, he thought building a mall around the store would siphon the direct competition that the Roosevelt Field Mall was taking away from them. He was so proud of this Fortunoff's location that he wanted to build a mall to showcase it. Despite their ambition, the proposal for the Fortunoff's new mall would be plagued by several lawsuits and countersuits, including $60 million in damage claims. The community didn't want the added congestion that the new mall would produce, given the already existing malls in the area, and the community's elected officials represented their desires in and out of court, stopping the mall's construction at every pass. Out of all of the malls I've been to across the country, I've never seen a jewelry store that sold what looks to be things that look like they used to belong in a hotel room. It's selling what seems to be used lampshades and other accoutrements that look like they were part of lamps and lighting fixtures that were taken apart. If this doesn't scream shady, something's wrong. And this was the first thing that I saw when I came into the mall. But as I got deeper into the place, the megalophobia kicked in. It was just massive, empty, and it was about 7 o'clock, so the mall was still open. But as you'll see when I go through, the only things that were open were this jewelry store, a convenience store kiosk that had a couple of dudes that were giving me the nastiest stink eye, and who followed me for a bit. I don't think they had any bad intentions, but I think they were just curious why somebody was actually in the mall. Along with the Pets for Love adoption center. I actually heard dogs barking pretty early on, but I don't think my camera picked it up. But it was strange to be in such a large mall to hear dogs barking in the distance, like lots of dogs barking in the distance. But I'm really glad that I filmed this place. It was actually right after a funeral that I attended for one of my good friends. It was in New Jersey, and after it finished, I just needed to take a drive. So I drove out to New York and ultimately Long Island, and here we are. After nearly 20 years trying to get the Fortunoff's mall built, in 1989 they finally cut through the state's red tape. They got the zoning approved, and they signed a deal with Australian mall developer Westfield to develop their property. The enclosed mall would surround the existing 213,000 square foot Fortunoffs, acting as a frame to highlight the department store. But due to the downturn of the economy in the early 90s, and the dauntingly massive scale of the project, Westfield pulled out in December of 1990. Given that the state politics was no longer a hurdle, the Fortunoffs plowed ahead, looking for an investor and developer for the project. They ultimately landed a deal with Simon DeBartolo. The Youngstown, Ohio developer swooped in to underwrite and co-sponsor the construction of the mall and would own a 50% stake in the mall alongside Fortunoff. Right now we're entering the part of the mall that used to contain the Fortunoff's courtyard. And while it's not a courtyard in the classical sense with conversation pits and planters and stuff like that, I still do consider it a courtyard as such. And in a moment you will see the shuttered Fortunoff storefront. It seems simple, but it just looks fancy. And I'm sure when it was open, the opulence that it would radiate into this courtyard was magnificent. I would have loved to get inside that Fortunoff's to see what it looks like inside. But even though 99% of the mall was vacant when I was there filming, this courtyard just felt dead. It just felt lifeless. The life that must have come through here when Fortunoff's was in its prime. Just knowing that, knowing the story behind this, and now seeing this Fortunoff's courtyard the way it is, it's so sad. It's just dead. But then there's this other storefront here with this awesome neon. And at first I thought it might have been like a candy counter or some children's store, but if you look in, you'll see various signage, like a Fossil Watches sign, and I'm really not sure what this place used to be. It's a total enigma, and because it was located right next door to the Fortunoffs, my only guess is that it was pretty important. So if you guys know what this place used to be, let me know down in the comments. Try and take clues from the signs that you see here, because it looks like it was just used as storage for some storefronts that may have had to get emptied out. But at one point, I bet this storefront was something special. So again, let me know in the comments, or hit me up in Discord or any of my other social media, and we can talk about it there. Links to everything are down in the description below.
Celebrated for its excellence.
The 736,000 square foot, $200 million Source Mall had its grand opening and formal dedication on September 5th, 1997. The developers billed the extra 523,000 square feet of gross leasable area as an expansion to the existing Fortunoffs. So while the Source technically was a new mall, its existence was merely to capitalize on the traffic and revenue that the Fortunoffs produced. However, this mall was supposed to be built in the early 70s, which was when the Fortunoff store was at its peak. By the end of the 20th century, sales had diminished at Fortunoffs, but perseverance prevailed and the mall came to be. When the mall was first proposed, it was intended to cater to the above-average income of the area, and at the time, within 10 miles of the property, the median household income was above $80,000. But as the economy weakened through the 90s, it was decided to make the mall more of an entertainment experience, with off-price retailers such as Nordstrom Rack, Saks off Fifth Avenue, and an Old Navy alongside the Fortunoffs. Among the mall's dining options would be a Rainforest Cafe, a Bertolini's, a Cheesecake Factory, and Brooklyn Diner. An inline food court would open with multiple fast food options, which was designed to resemble an airplane hangar, to pay homage to the old airfield that once stood in its place where Charles Lindbergh took off from in 1927. Other tenants would open a few months after the dedication, namely a Sega Gameworks, where patrons were able to play a huge variety of virtual reality games, and at the time this was incredibly futuristic and forward-thinking. There was a massive Cosmetics Plus superstore, and the Pure Maximus Spa and Salon, which was a spa for all, including trained masseuses and thermal baths, where a continental breakfast with champagne was served. Developers viewed Long Island as having among the best demographics in the country, and brought the Source as an experience catering to that community. It's important to note that Simon DeBartolo acquired the competing Roosevelt Field Mall in 1998, which may have caused their attention to divert away from the Source in the coming years. But the Source appraised for nearly $180 million in 1998, so they weren't concerned with the property just yet. But keep that in the back of your mind for now. Right now we're coming up on the food court, and as I stated just before, they designed this food court to look like an airplane hangar. As a matter of fact, the entire place looks like an airplane hangar, especially the ceilings. But see if you can spot a couple of things that were placed in there to pay homage to that old airfield. If you spot them, leave it in the comments. Into the early aughts, tenants at the Source would come and go. The Rainforest Cafe departed in 2000, and by 2003, H&M had opened a much larger and more attractive clothing store up the street at Simon's own Roosevelt Field Mall. The Virgin Megastore shuttered in 2004, for which Simon gave no reason for dissolving their lease, but with Circuit City operating alongside it, I'm sure the in-house competition was a big contributor to the decision. It was at this time that Simon began putting more attention into the more effulgent, more massive, and much more successful Roosevelt Field Mall. So they dumped half of their holdings in the source, now owning just 25% and sitting as minority shareholder. This would set the stage for them to unload the property, while minimizing any negative financial impact in the long term. In the latter aughts, as tenants were fleeing the source, the only real traffic was coming in for the Fortunoffs, and to a lesser extent the outward-facing restaurants. But in 2009, Fortunoffs filed for bankruptcy and shuttered, taking some big tenants down with them. In March of 2009, the same month that Fortunoff would cease operations, the Circuit City would also shutter, with Steve & Barry's closing shortly thereafter. There were so many banks at the turn of the millennium giving out massive loans to developers, most of which carried low interest rates over a 10-year maturity. But when 2009 hit, and after retailers were failing to produce the same traffic they saw in the 80s and 90s, they were only making minimum interest payments. And when the loan maturity date crept up, the balloon payments came due, which in the case of Simon for this property, the bill was for $148 million, which consisted of $142 million of outstanding debt and $6 million of accrued interest. They didn't pay, and the lenders took ownership of the mall. At the time, the mall was sitting at nearly 75% vacancy in the early 2010s, with only a handful of third-rate inline tenants and a couple of restaurants keeping the lights on inside, along with the Fortunoff's backyard store, which did bring the Fortunoff's name back to the mall and saw a little bit more traffic then, along with Old Navy and Nordstrom Rack. But these off-price retailers were all over New York by this time, and the source had nothing unique to offer their shoppers, and the mall continued to fade into obscurity. At 11:30 a.m. on Tuesday, August 28, 2012, a foreclosure auction took place at the Nassau County Supreme Court in Mineola. The auction would last for less than 1 minute. Scott Tross, who was the attorney representing the mall's bondholders by a trust known as CMAT 1999-C1 Old County Road LLC, he gave what's called the, quote, upset price, which is the lowest minimum price they would accept from a bidder to make a successful auction. This price was $148 million, which would cover 100% of the debt Simon owed their lenders. This price was despite the mall appraising for $51 million in May of 2012. So the auction kicked off at 11:30 a.m., and a minimum initial bid came in at $10.2 million. A man named Michael then entered another bid for $11 million. In the course of 60 seconds, after upping each other by $100,000 here, $100,000 there, all of those involved said that the maximum they would pay is $25 million. And since nobody was willing to pay the full price, the auction failed, and the bank kept the property. In 2014, Nassau Regional Off-Track Betting announced an unsuccessful plan to transform the long-vacant Fortunoff store into a video gambling parlor. The vacant anchor was owned separately and carried its own debt of nearly $50 million just by itself, so investors weren't too excited about purchasing the property, and they didn't want to take on that debt. The Source Mall's special servicer decided to place the mall on sale in 2016. Lesso Mall Development, Long Island Incorporated, which is a subsidiary of Hong Kong-based firm China Lesso Group Holdings Limited, they purchased the mall and the empty Fortunoff's building for $92 million at the end of May of 2017. Lesso unveiled a plan to redevelop half of the mall into what they call Lesso Home. According to their statement, the renovated mall would feature a food and beverage area, a children's fun center, a business conference center, and Lesso's regional corporate headquarters. They would also add a town square for community events and other entertainment and live attractions. For the part of the mall that would be spared by their wrecking crews, they would update the flooring, address some accessibility concerns by adding 3 new entrances, along with hopefully repairing some of the mall's many glaring blemishes. Frankly, their plans were the best of both worlds. They were keeping part of the mall to retain the classic mall shopping experience, but they were also repurposing half of it into something better suited for the community and local and international businesses. It's actually a pretty legitimate plan. But remember, this was back in 2017. So this video was filmed sometime after the new owners announced the Lesso home redevelopment, and according to locals I've spoken with, and a few videos I've come across of the place recently, the redevelopment isn't finished just yet. But it also doesn't look like any of the mall has been demolished, nor do any of the renovations seem too advanced or different from what the mall used to be. Most recently, I read that the new owners kicked out the non-profit pet adoption tenant Pets for Love to make way for a tenant called Wanderloft, which is a well-appointed creative space for individuals to create stuff. On the Pets for Love website, they say they're, quote, evicted but not gone. We will relocate and rebuild, close quote. It's a true scumbag move for the new owners to kick out puppies just to make some hipster space for people to create stuff. A link to the Pets for Love Foundation is in the link below, so show them some love and help them relocate. I'm gonna need some help from all of you out there to piece together what happened recently. Is Lesso Home open now? Has any of the mall actually been demolished and repurposed? You guys are always so incredible with the engagement you provide me in the comment section and the Discord server on updates to ExLog locations. And if you could comment down below with updates on this place, it would be much appreciated. I would also really appreciate it if you guys left a like, subscribed, and rang the bell. Even if you are subscribed, it might not be rung. It goes a long way in showing me that the weekly quarantine release schedule is something you guys appreciate. And during this time, I'm here for all of you in the best way I know how, and I'll keep doing it as long as we're locked down. I'd like to send a special thanks out to all of my patrons and to everyone that has joined my channel as a member, of whom you are known to me as the Quite Studios Elite Explorers. You guys seriously rock. I also wanted to thank the Dead Malls of Discord family and SEAL members. I urge all of you to subscribe to and follow everyone in my description, as they're all on that infamous seal from the first few seconds of the ExLog. They all make incredible content, and while we've had to shed a few members from the seal here and there, due to those ex-SEAL members being complete weirdos and causing way too much drama, the seal as it stands today is 100% solid, and I stand behind each of these people completely. So thank you all again for the amazing support, interaction, and engagement. Cheers to a fantastic start for ExLog Phase 4, and I can't wait to bring you all the way through it. I'll see you guys next week on ExLog 57. And in the meantime, stay home if you can, stay safe, take care, and have a fantastic day.